My husband left me for my sister, so I sent their affair evidence to his entire company, and he lost his $300K job. My name is Diane, and I'm 64 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. I spent most of my life believing in family, loyalty, and the kind of love that grows stronger with time. But last year, everything I believed in was ripped away from me in one of the cruelest ways possible. I was married to my husband, Michael, for 27 years. We raised a son together. We built a life, a home, something I thought was unshakable. But I was wrong. The person I trusted the most betrayed me with the person I never saw coming. My own sister. It started with a text message that wasn't meant for me. One message, and suddenly the ground under my feet was gone. What followed was months of lies, hidden meetings, whispered phone calls, and the slow unraveling of everything I once called home. But I didn't just cry about it. I didn't shrink. I gathered the truth piece by piece, and when I was ready, I made sure every single person Michael worked with knew exactly who he really was. Before I take you through the whole story, I want to know something. Where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which city or state you're in, and if you want to hear more true, emotional stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I share a new story every single day, and maybe one of them will feel like it was written just for you. Now take a breath and listen closely. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone. But what I did next, I did for every woman who's ever been betrayed and left to pick up the pieces alone. I met Michael in the fall of 1992, outside a grocery store in a quiet town in Connecticut. I had just turned 31 and wasn't looking for anything. I was recently divorced, working 2 part-time jobs and trying to hold myself together after a painful breakup that had left me unsure if I even believed in love anymore. But there he was, standing by the trunk of my car, asking if I needed help with my bags. He had kind eyes and a voice that made me feel calm. I said yes, even though I didn't really need it. Something about him felt safe. He took his time with me. We had coffee on chilly mornings, walked through the farmer's market on Saturdays, and talked for hours without ever running out of things to say. He never rushed me. He never pressured me. It was the first time I'd been with someone who made me feel like I could just be exactly who I was. When he proposed 2 years later, in front of the fireplace in my apartment, I said yes without hesitation. It felt right. We got married in my parents' backyard in the spring. Rachel, my sister, stood beside me in a light blue dress that she picked herself. She cried during her speech and told me she had never seen me so happy. At the time, I believed every word she said. Rachel and I had always been close. Growing up, we shared a bedroom, secrets, and dreams. I helped her through every breakup, every disappointment, every moment she felt lost. I was the stable one, the one who stayed in one place and made a home. Rachel drifted. She married 3 times, lived in 5 states, and changed careers like most people change haircuts. But she always came back to me. I always opened the door. Michael built his career slowly. By his 40s, he was a senior financial analyst at a large firm in New York, earning over $300,000 a year. He worked long hours, but he never complained. He provided for our family, made sure we had everything we needed. After our son Tyler was born, I decided to stay home full-time. It wasn't a sacrifice for me. I loved being a mother. I loved creating a warm home. I was good at it, and I believed we were happy. Rachel visited often. She'd show up after another failed relationship, needing a place to stay or just a familiar voice to calm her down. She'd sleep on our couch, borrow my sweaters, cook pancakes in my kitchen like she lived there. Michael always welcomed her. He said it was good for Tyler to have his aunt around. I agreed. Family meant everything to me. But then came that Thanksgiving. It was a small moment, barely noticeable. Rachel was helping me in the kitchen while Michael carved the turkey. I stepped into the dining room to set the table, then walked back in just as they exchanged a glance. It lasted less than a second, but it wasn't casual. There was something behind it, something too comfortable, too familiar. I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was being silly, tired from cooking all day. I had no reason to question either of them. They were 2 of the people I trusted most in the world. The very idea of something inappropriate between them felt impossible. Still, little things began to pile up after that. Michael started dressing nicer on weekends. He shaved more often, started using cologne again, even when we weren't going anywhere. He became more protective of his phone and changed the password without saying anything. Rachel, who used to visit almost every week, suddenly stopped coming by as much. When she did, she barely made eye contact with me. The warmth between us had gone cold, and I couldn't explain why. One afternoon, I asked her directly if something was wrong. She laughed it off and said I was imagining things, that I needed a hobby. I tried to smile, but the way she said it didn't feel like her. It felt sharp, defensive, like she was hiding something and wanted me to stop looking. I didn't push her, but from that day forward, I started paying closer attention. I watched how Michael looked at his phone. I noticed the way he hesitated when I asked simple questions. There were nights he said he had to work late, but came home without his usual briefcase. One night I smelled perfume on his shirt. Not mine, not Rachel's either. Or maybe it was. I didn't know anymore. It felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't want to see. I kept telling myself to let it go, to trust the people I loved. But trust doesn't live in silence. It dies there. And deep down, something in me had already started mourning. I started waking up in the middle of the night with this heaviness in my chest. It wasn't fear exactly. It wasn't even sadness. It felt like my body knew something my heart wasn't ready to admit. Michael slept beside me, but it felt like he was miles away. He didn't reach for me anymore. And when I reached for him, he'd turn over and mumble something about being tired from work. He used to hold my hand while we slept. Now he just stayed still, cold, like a stranger. In the mornings, he'd kiss me on the forehead and ask how I slept. I'd say I slept fine. He'd say he loved me. We both lied. I started feeling invisible, not just to him, but to the world. Tyler had already moved out. The house felt too big, too quiet. I'd wander from room to room, standing in doorways, looking at old photos, wondering when I stopped being someone people needed. When I stopped being seen, Rachel still came around, but she was different. She didn't look me in the eye. She avoided simple questions. One time, I brought up Michael in the middle of a conversation, just casually, and she got tense, told me he was a great man. She said it too quickly, like she had something to prove. That moment stuck with me. And then I noticed how Michael started dressing differently. Nicer shirts on the weekends. Cologne again, even when we didn't have plans. He changed his phone password without telling me. Said it was for work. Rachel stopped coming by as much, but when she did, she always had her phone face down. Once, I caught her smiling at a message, then she looked up and froze when she saw me watching her. I told myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. I didn't want to chase shadows. But the feeling inside me wouldn't go away. Something was happening, something I wasn't supposed to see. One night, Michael forgot his phone on the kitchen counter. I stood there, staring at it for 5 minutes. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it like it was a bomb waiting to go off. I walked away. But the seed was planted. I knew I'd look eventually. I just wasn't ready yet. The following week, Michael went on a business trip. 2 nights, nothing unusual. Rachel showed up the next evening with a bottle of wine and a cake from the bakery downtown. She said she missed me. Said we hadn't had sister time in too long. I smiled and nodded, but everything inside me was tight. She was trying too hard. While she showered, her phone lit up on the kitchen table. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But I did. The message was short. Just 1 line. From someone saved as M, it said, "I miss you. 2 nights without you feels like hell." I didn't breathe. My stomach turned. I stood there frozen, the words burning into my brain. When Rachel came back from the bathroom, I was pouring tea and smiling like nothing had happened. She had no idea I'd seen it. That night, after she left, I pulled out an old notebook from the drawer. I started writing things down, dates, times, patterns, little details I had ignored for too long. I needed to see it all laid out. I needed to stop pretending. Michael came home the next day, more affectionate than usual. He brought flowers, asked if I wanted to go out to dinner. Rachel disappeared for 2 weeks. When she finally came back, she was tan and glowing, wearing a new bracelet and talking about how she'd spent a weekend at a spa in Vermont. I asked her what spa. She mumbled something vague. Later that night, Michael mentioned how cold Vermont was and how the roads had been closed due to early snow. He didn't even know she had said she'd been there. Neither of them realized what they were doing. But I did. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. I didn't have solid proof, No pictures, no confessions. But I didn't need any more signs. I wasn't guessing anymore. Something had broken, and I couldn't unsee it. What came next wasn't about revenge. It was about me, about reclaiming my sense of reality, about standing up for the woman I had been for almost 30 years. The woman who gave everything and asked for so little. The wife, the mother, the sister. Now it was time to stop closing my eyes, and when I finally opened them, I made sure they couldn't close theirs ever again. The notebook became my lifeline. I kept it hidden in the bottom of the hallway closet, behind old photo albums and a winter coat I hadn't worn in years. Every day I wrote down details: his schedule, her visits, gaps in time that didn't make sense. Patterns started to appear. Nights he said he was working late matched perfectly with weekends. She came back looking rested and smug. I started calling his office when he said he'd be staying late. A few times, the receptionist told me he had left hours earlier. I'd thank her, hang up, and sit at the kitchen table staring at the phone, numb. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt cold, focused, almost mechanical. I bought a prepaid cell phone and used it only to take photos. I didn't want anything traced back to me. I began snapping pictures of the dashboard clock every time he left the house, took note of the clothes he wore, and even recorded short clips of him saying where he'd be. It felt ridiculous, but something inside me needed to collect the truth, piece by piece, like armor for the war I hadn't declared yet, and then I followed him. It was raining that day. I wore a scarf and sunglasses even though it was gray outside. He left at 7:10 p.m., kissed my cheek, said he had a last-minute meeting with a new client. I waited exactly 9 minutes before I grabbed my keys and got in the car. He didn't drive toward the city. He drove west. I stayed 2 cars behind, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. He pulled into a small inn off the highway. I knew the place. It was the kind of cozy, candlelit place people went to when they wanted privacy. I watched him park. A few minutes later, Rachel's car turned into the lot. I stayed in my car with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't take pictures. I didn't need to. That image burned itself into me. He was cheating on me. With my sister, the truth didn't feel like a stab. It felt like a slow, suffocating weight pressing on my chest. I sat there for 20 minutes, waiting for the anger to come, but it didn't. Just a cold silence, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I drove home slowly, replaying the past year in my mind. Every smile, every lie, every time she hugged me and said she loved me. I thought of the wedding toast she gave at our anniversary party, of the way he held my hand that night while telling our friends how lucky he was to have me. I walked into our bedroom and looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. Our wedding day. He was smiling. I was too. I picked it up, stared at it for a long time, and then placed it face down. The next day, I didn't confront him. I made him breakfast, kissed him goodbye, told him to have a good day, and then I opened my laptop. I created a new email account. I drafted a simple message. No emotion, just facts. Then I started going through our photo library. I pulled images from family gatherings, vacations, birthdays. I found 3 pictures where he and Rachel were just a little too close, their eyes locked in a way that made my stomach turn. I saved them all. Every detail mattered. For the next 3 weeks, I played the game. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I asked about his work. I even invited Rachel over for brunch. She said yes. She walked into my home like nothing had happened, sat on my couch, drank my coffee, and complimented the flowers on the table. I had bought them that morning. They were lilies, her favorite. While she was in the bathroom, I opened her purse. Her phone was right there, unlocked. A message from him sat on the screen. It said, "You looked incredible last night. I still taste you." I took a picture of it with my burner phone. That night, while Michael was in the shower, I opened his briefcase. Inside was a hotel receipt, same inn, same night. That was the final piece. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat at my desk and uploaded every bit of evidence. Photos, messages, timelines, hotel receipts. I attached them all to the draft email, addressed it to the executive board of his company. Every partner, every senior staff member, I didn't add a message. Just one subject line. Your employee, Michael Reed. Thought you should know. I saved the draft, but I didn't hit send. Not yet. I wanted him to see me again first. I wanted him to look me in the eyes before his whole world came crashing down. He came home that night, humming. He kissed my cheek, poured himself a glass of wine, and told me he'd had a productive day. I stood at the stove, stirring pasta sauce, nodding, asking how his meeting went. He gave me a name I didn't recognize, some fake client, and said he might have to travel again next week. I said I understood. We sat down for dinner, and he talked the whole time. About work, the neighbor's new dog, some show he wanted to watch together. He didn't notice how quiet I was. He didn't ask how my day had been. He never did anymore. After dinner, I told him I was tired and headed upstairs. He stayed downstairs to finish his wine. I opened my laptop, opened the email draft. I looked at the attachments one last time. A photo of him and Rachel standing too close in our backyard. A hotel receipt with the same check-in date as the text on Rachel's phone. A screenshot of their messages. And one photo I had taken at the brunch. Rachel's hand resting on his knee under the table. She didn't know I had seen it, but I had. I saw everything. I hit send. It was done. The email was gone. Sent to over 30 people in his company, senior partners, department heads, the firm's HR director. Every name I had collected during the last 2 weeks. I closed the laptop and went to brush my teeth. I stared at my reflection and tried to find the woman I used to be. She was there, somewhere behind the exhaustion and the quiet rage. Michael came to bed a little while later. He kissed my shoulder and whispered goodnight. The next morning, I woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, emails. He sat on the edge of the bed, confused. Then panicked, then quiet. He didn't say anything to me. Not a single word. He just got dressed and left. At noon, Rachel called me. I let it ring. Then I turned my phone off. By evening, the house was quiet. Michael hadn't come home. I didn't expect him to. I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, looking out the window as the sky turned orange. It felt like the end of something, but not like I imagined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was still. The next morning, Michael walked through the door like someone who had been in a car crash. His eyes were bloodshot and his tie was crooked. He sat down across from me in the kitchen and said nothing. I didn't speak either. Finally, he said, "You ruined me." I looked him in the eyes and replied, "No, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." He didn't try to explain. He knew better. I asked him how long it had been going on. He said 2 years, maybe a little more. I asked him if he ever felt guilty. He didn't answer. Then I asked the one question I had been avoiding. Why her? He looked down and said, "I don't know." I nodded. That answer hurt more than anything else he could have said. I told him to pack a bag and leave. He didn't argue. He went upstairs, grabbed a few things, and walked out of the house without looking back. I watched him from the kitchen window as he drove away. Part of me wanted to collapse, but the bigger part of me, the part that had been silent for too long, felt something close to peace. Rachel tried calling again. And again. Eventually, she left a voicemail, crying, begging me to talk to her. I didn't listen to the full message. I deleted it. 3 days later, a letter from Michael's firm arrived. He had been let go, terminated for personal misconduct damaging to the company's reputation. His 6-figure job gone in a day. It didn't bring me joy, but it did bring me closure. I printed the letter and folded it neatly. I placed it in the same box where I kept my wedding photos. Then I taped the box shut and put it in the attic. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I just didn't want to look at it anymore. Some people say revenge is never worth it, that it makes you bitter. But I wasn't bitter. I was awake. For the first time in years, I could breathe, and I wasn't finished yet. The silence after he left wasn't what I expected. I thought it would feel like grief, heavy, dark, but it didn't. It felt clean. The house was quiet in a different way now. Not sad quiet, peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet where nothing is being hidden anymore, where the lies have finally stopped buzzing in the background like static. The first night alone, I slept straight through until morning. No waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding. No feeling like someone was watching me but not really seeing me. I opened my eyes at 7, made coffee, and watched the sunrise through the kitchen window without saying a word to anyone. And it was enough. People started to talk. Neighbors noticed his car hadn't been around. A friend from church called and asked if everything was okay. I said we were taking some space. I didn't owe anyone the full story. I wasn't ready to tell it. Not yet. Rachel stopped trying to call. After 4 voicemails and 1 email, all of which I deleted without opening, she finally gave up. I think she expected me to scream at her, or cry, or beg her to explain why. But I didn't do any of those things. I wasn't interested in her guilt. Her guilt wouldn't fix anything, and I wasn't going to help her carry it. I started walking again, just around the block at first, then through the park, then by the water. With every step, I felt pieces of myself coming back. Pieces I had put aside for years while I worried about Michael's schedule, his dinners, his moods. I had forgotten what it felt like to move just for me. One afternoon, I stopped in front of an art supply store I hadn't visited in over a decade. I used to paint, before motherhood took over, before marriage became my full-time role. I walked in and bought a set of brushes, a few tubes of paint, and a blank canvas. That night, I sat in the garage with music playing softly and painted for hours. I didn't care what it looked like. It wasn't about being good. It was about feeling something again, anything. For the first time in years, I felt like a person, not just a wife, not just a mother, not just someone holding everyone else together. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. From Michael, it was handwritten. I recognized his cursive immediately, slanted, careful, overly polite. I stood at the counter holding the envelope for several minutes before opening it. It wasn't an apology. It was a request. He wanted to meet, just for coffee. He wrote that he missed talking to me, that he wasn't sleeping, that he'd lost more than just his job. He'd lost his best friend. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't respond either. He had made his choices. I had made mine. But his words lingered in my mind for days. I replayed our years together. The good ones, the quiet ones, the ones where I thought we were solid, when in reality, we were already slipping away from each other. And that's what hurt the most. Not the betrayal itself, but the realization that somewhere along the line I had stopped asking if I was happy. I had been so focused on keeping the family together, on being enough for everyone, that I forgot to check if I was still enough for me. So no, I didn't want coffee. I didn't want closure. I wanted peace, and that's what I started building, one day at a time. I joined a book club at the library downtown. I met women my age who had lived through their own versions of heartbreak. Some had been widowed, others divorced. One had lost a child. We didn't talk about the past much. We just read, drank tea, and shared quiet moments of understanding. I didn't have to explain myself there. And that was a gift. At night, I started lighting candles again. Not for romance, just for warmth. For myself. I filled the house with scents I loved. Lavender, cedarwood, cinnamon. I put on music I hadn't heard in years. Nina Simone, Carole King, Patsy Cline. Each song brought back memories, but instead of breaking me, they reminded me of who I had been long before Michael. Before Rachel, before the lies, I was coming home to myself, and I knew deep down this was just the beginning. The hardest part wasn't being alone. It was getting used to being seen again by myself. For years, I had built a life around other people's needs. Michael's calendar, Tyler's school years, Rachel's emergencies. Somewhere along the way, my own reflection became unfamiliar. I used to avoid mirrors unless I was putting on makeup for church or a family event. Now I was forcing myself to look. To really look, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw a survivor. My skin had changed. There were deeper lines around my eyes and mouth. My hands looked like my mother's, strong, veined, capable. My body didn't look the way it used to, but it had carried a child, built a home, endured betrayal, and still held me up every single day. That counted for something. That counted for everything. One morning, while walking through the park, I sat down on a bench beside a woman I didn't know. She was reading a novel I had loved years ago. We talked for 15 minutes. Nothing deep, just books, coffee, the weather. When I stood to leave, she smiled and said, "You're easy to talk to. I hope I see you here again." I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone said that to me. I went home and cried, not out of sadness, but because something inside me had softened again. A little part of me had been thawed. That week, I rearranged the house. I moved furniture, donated old clothes, painted the guest room a soft blue. The walls had been beige for 20 years. I didn't want beige anymore. I went through the attic, opened the box with the wedding photos, and took out one picture. Just one. Our anniversary party. Me laughing with Tyler, holding a glass of wine, Michael in the background talking to someone else. I kept that one because I looked happy. Not because of him, because of me. I framed it and put it on my desk. A few weeks later, Tyler came to visit. I hadn't told him everything, just enough. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face calm but searching. I always knew something was off, he said. They were never careful. I just didn't want to believe it. I asked him if he was angry. He shook his head. Not really. I'm just proud of you. I didn't expect that. Those words stayed with me for days. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a breakthrough. It looks like making your own dinner and eating it slowly. It looks like taking yourself to the movies, laughing out loud at something silly, saying no without explaining, saying yes to something you used to love. I started volunteering twice a week at the local library. Just shelving books, greeting kids after school, helping older ladies print out recipes or scan letters from their grandchildren. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave my days rhythm. People started to smile when they saw me walk in. One woman, Lorraine, invited me for coffee after our shift. She was 71, widowed, and had a laugh that could fill a room. Over coffee, she told me about her first heartbreak, a man who left her for his secretary in 1983. She said it took her 15 years to fall in love again. Not with another man, she said. Stirring cream into her cup. With myself, I smiled. I knew exactly what she meant. The world treats older women like we're invisible, like our stories have already been told. But we carry entire novels inside us, full of plot twists, betrayals, love scenes, and comebacks. We're not done. We're never done. I started writing again. At first just short journal entries, then letters I never sent, then scenes from a story that had been living inside me for years. A woman who wakes up one day and decides she won't shrink anymore, that she's not too old, that she deserves more. That woman looked a lot like me. Rachel sent a letter a month after everything exploded. A real one, in handwriting that looked shakier than I remembered. It was long, messy, filled with half apologies and explanations that read more like excuses. She wrote that she never meant to fall in love with him, that it just happened, that she thought I'd never find out, that she hoped I'd forgive her. I read it once and folded it back up. Then I placed it in the fireplace and lit a match. Forgiveness is powerful. But so is letting go. I didn't want her in my life anymore, not because I hated her, but because I no longer had space for people who saw my kindness as something to take advantage of. I had room now, but only for what added peace. A few weeks later, I passed by that same inn off the highway. The one where I had watched Michael and Rachel meet. I didn't slow down. I didn't even blink. The power that place once held over me was gone. That's the thing about healing. One day, without realizing it, you pass by the very thing that used to break you, and it doesn't even touch you. Spring came early that year. The trees outside my kitchen window started to bloom in late March, their branches dotted with tiny bursts of green. I opened the windows for the first time in months and let the breeze in. The house smelled like fresh air and lemon oil. It smelled like possibility. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, coffee in hand, listening to birdsong and thinking about how much can change in one season. Not just outside, inside. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't look away. I took my time. My hair had more gray in it. My skin was softer in places that used to be firm. My arms had a little shake to them when I lifted things. But my eyes, they looked awake, brighter than they had in years. There was a stillness in them now, but also something sharper, like I had learned to see clearly again. I didn't miss Michael. That surprised me. I thought I would. I thought grief would hit me in waves, unexpected and punishing. But it didn't come that way. What I missed wasn't him. It was the version of myself I had been before the lies, before I let love become obligation, before I accepted silence as normal. I missed the woman who used to dream, and she was finally coming back. At the library one Thursday, Lorraine introduced me to her nephew, Daniel. He was recently retired, soft-spoken, and kind in a way that didn't feel performative. He didn't talk over people. He asked questions and actually listened. We talked for a while over coffee in the back room while sorting through a donation bin. He told me about his garden. I told him about my paintings. He asked if I'd ever shown my work. I laughed and told him I barely showed it to myself. He smiled and said, "Well, maybe it's time." I didn't feel butterflies. I didn't feel electricity, but I felt safe. And I realized that was more valuable than any spark, because safety, real safety, had been missing from my life for far too long. When I got home that day, I looked through the stack of canvases I had painted over the last few months. Some were terrible, some were messy, one or two made me pause. I picked one of those, a simple coastal scene, pale blues and silvers, and brought it to the local art cafe downtown. They hung it in the window 2 days later. That small act of being seen felt bigger than anything I'd done in years. A few days after that, I ran into Michael at the grocery store. He looked thinner, worn. There was a tiredness in his face that hadn't been there before. He saw me before I saw him, but didn't try to avoid me. He walked over and said hello. I said it back. He asked how I was. I told him I was good. Really good, he nodded. Said I looked happy. Then, after a pause, he said, "I never deserved you. It wasn't an apology. But I didn't need one." I said, "No, you didn't." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the conversation 100 times like I might have months ago. I went home, fed my cat, played music, and cooked dinner. The next day, Daniel left a note for me at the library. It was handwritten on the back of a gardening catalog. It said, "If you ever want to see the lilacs blooming in my yard, come by Saturday afternoon. Bring tea." I stared at the note for a long time, not because I was nervous, but because I realized something I hadn't admitted to. Myself, I wanted to go. Not because I was ready to fall in love again, but because I wasn't afraid to be alone anymore, and that's what made it safe to be with someone. Saturday came. I wore a light yellow sweater, one I hadn't worn in years. The color made my eyes stand out, according to my sister, back when compliments between us were still innocent. I didn't think of her with anger anymore. I just didn't think of her much at all. Daniel's garden was stunning. Rows of lavender, patches of mint and thyme, a small wooden bench under a blooming pear tree. We sat there for hours, sipping tea, talking about books and growing older, and how time rearranges our memories when we're not paying attention. He didn't try to touch me, didn't hint at anything. He just sat with me, and that was enough. That night, as I climbed into bed, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something soft, quiet, steady. Hope, not the naive kind I had when I was young. Not the desperate kind I clung to during the worst moments of my marriage. This was older hope, wiser, the kind that knows joy might not come in fireworks, but in stillness. In early mornings, in blooming lilacs, in choosing yourself over and over until it becomes second nature. I wasn't who I used to be, and thank God for that, I was more. There's something strange about finding peace after chaos. You don't always trust it at first. It feels too quiet, too still. After so much pain, your body expects the next blow, the next heartbreak, the next betrayal. But when it doesn't come, you begin to understand that the silence isn't a warning. It's a gift. I spent that entire summer leaning into the quiet. I repainted the kitchen, soft sage green. I opened all the curtains and let the sun back into my house. I bought fresh herbs and planted them in small clay pots on the windowsill. Basil, rosemary, thyme, things I had never had time to grow before. Now I did. I took the long way home from errands, stopped in local shops I had passed for years but never entered. One day I bought a pair of earrings shaped like tiny leaves. I wore them with my hair tucked behind my ears, even though no one was there to notice. That wasn't the point. The point was that I noticed. Every evening, I lit a candle on the porch and sat outside with a book. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just watch the sky shift colors. I let time move slowly. After decades of rushing, organizing, pleasing, and controlling, I finally let go. And the world didn't fall apart. It was the opposite. I started to feel held, not by anyone, but by something inside myself I hadn't known was still alive. Daniel and I became friends. Real friends. We had tea on Saturdays, sometimes dinner. He brought me tomatoes from his garden. I painted him a landscape of the trail we both liked to walk. He hung it in his hallway. It wasn't romantic, not yet, and maybe it never would be. But there was companionship, and for the first time in my life, I realized that was enough. It was more than enough. I started getting emails from women who had seen my painting at the cafe. One woman, Patricia, asked if I taught classes. I said no, but she persisted. Within a month, I was hosting a small group of 5 women, all over 60, every Tuesday afternoon in my garage, which I cleaned out and turned into a little art studio. They arrived with nervous smiles, bottles of water, paint-stained aprons they hadn't worn in years. Some hadn't painted since college, some never had. It didn't matter. We laughed. We spilled paint. We talked about things we never said out loud. About feeling invisible, about our bodies changing, about loneliness that sneaks in at night and stays until morning. We didn't try to fix each other. We just witnessed each other, and there's real power in that. One of the women, Joyce, brought a photo of herself from 1975, long hair, big sunglasses sitting on the hood of a red convertible. She said, "I want to remember what it felt like to be her again." We all understood. By fall, the Tuesday group became the best part of my week. I bought a kettle for the garage. We started bringing snacks. Sometimes we painted. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just sat and breathed and remembered who we were before the world told us to shrink. The truth is, I didn't rebuild my life. I built a new one that had no room for secrets, no room for people who drained me, no room for pretending. I had lived so many years performing the role of the good wife, the steady sister, the strong mother. Now, I was just Diane, and that was enough. One afternoon, Rachel showed up. She parked across the street and stood by her car for a long time before crossing. I was watering the plants outside. I looked up and saw her, older than I remembered. Her posture was different, softer. She didn't walk like someone proud. She walked like someone unsure if she'd be let in. I didn't speak first. She said, "You look good." I said, "I feel good." She stood there in silence. Her hands fidgeted. Her voice cracked when she finally asked, "Could we talk?" I shook my head, not unkindly, but firmly. "There's nothing left to talk about. I wanted you to know I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "I believe you," she nodded. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't look away. "I miss you," she whispered, and I answered honestly, "I don't miss who you became. That was the last time I saw her," and I didn't feel guilty, because closure isn't always about healing a relationship. Sometimes it's about honoring the version of yourself who was betrayed and saying, "You deserved better," and then walking forward without dragging the weight of someone else's choices behind you. That night, I sat in the studio long after the others had gone. I pulled out a fresh canvas and wrote in pencil across the top. What now? It wasn't a question of fear anymore. It was a question of wonder. I was 65. I had crow's feet, soft hands, and a quiet fire in me that I hadn't had since my 20s. I didn't want adventure. I didn't need a fairy tale. I wanted mornings where I woke up without dread. Afternoons filled with the scent of paint and the sound of Nina Simone. Evenings where I could sit on the porch and feel the wind on my skin and know that this ordinary, steady, present life was mine, and no one could take it from me again. I used to think endings were loud. I thought they came with slamming doors, shouted words, something dramatic that could measure the size of the pain. But now I know the real endings are quiet. They happen in stillness, in decisions made alone, with no one watching. In mornings that feel different for no reason you can explain. The end of my marriage wasn't the moment I sent the email. It wasn't even when Michael walked out the door. The real end came the day I stopped waiting for someone else to make it better. That was the day I came back to myself. A few months after Rachel showed up at my door, I received a message from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Angela. She worked in the same company as Michael. Or used to. She told me she saw the email. Everyone did. It had gone viral within the company, passed around quietly, but with force. She said she wanted me to know something. We all knew something was off about him, she wrote. But nobody ever imagined it was this. What you did, that took courage. I hope you're okay. I sat with that message for a long time, not because it stirred anger or sadness, but because it made me realize that truth always finds its way out, sometimes not to destroy, but to liberate. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There are some victories that don't need applause, and there are some women who don't need to scream to be heard. These days, I wake up early and walk by the water before the rest of the world opens its eyes. The breeze is crisp, and the sky shifts between soft pink and gold. I nod at the other early risers, mostly older women like me, moving at their own pace. There's something unspoken between us, like we've all seen things we never thought we'd survive. And yet, here we are, moving, breathing, living. One morning, I passed by a small girl playing in her front yard. She was painting on the sidewalk with big, messy strokes of chalk, blues, purples, greens. Her hair was wild. Her shirt was inside out. She was completely lost in what she was doing. Her grandmother sat nearby in a lawn chair, sipping coffee. I smiled at them, and as I passed, the girl looked up and said, "Are you an artist?" I paused. I hadn't said those words out loud before. Not in years, but this time I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "I am." She grinned and asked if I wanted to help. I looked down at my shoes, then back at her drawing. It was a flower, lopsided, imperfect, beautiful. Knelt down and picked up a piece of chalk. We drew side by side for 10 minutes, strangers connected by nothing more than color and time. That moment stayed with me longer than I expected. When I got home, I started a new painting. Not for the cafe, not for anyone. Just for me. It was messy, abstract, full of strange shapes and bold colors. There was no structure, no plan. But when I stepped back, I saw something that surprised me. It looked like freedom. Tyler came by the next evening. We sat on the porch with iced tea, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. He asked me if I ever thought about dating again. I laughed and said I barely had time between the studio, the book club, the library shifts, and my walks. He smiled and said, "Good, I like seeing you like this." Like what? Like you. That hit deeper than I expected because I was. For the first time in years, I wasn't a version of someone. I wasn't adjusting myself to fit someone else's needs, or holding back my voice to keep the peace, or ignoring my instincts to protect a fragile illusion of family. I was just me. And that was the most radical thing I had ever done. Sometimes I wonder what Michael tells people now. If he rewrites the story in a way that makes him the victim, if Rachel ever mentions me, if they stayed together or fell apart like I always suspected they would. But those thoughts don't stay long. They pass through like clouds, visible, but harmless. I don't live in their world anymore. And that's the true ending, not the one with drama, the one where you finally stop carrying what isn't yours. The one where you water your own garden, hang your own paintings, tell your own truth, even if no one's listening, especially if no one's listening, because healing isn't a destination. It's a daily choice, and some days it's a hard one, but other days like today, it feels natural, like breathing. So to the woman listening to this, maybe sitting alone, maybe rebuilding something, maybe wondering if it's too late. It's not. You are not too old. You are not too broken. And you are not done. You're still here. You're still holding the brush, and there's still so much canvas left.